Welcome to a This Is Jazz interview. My name is Quentin Walston, and today we are sitting down with Aaron Parks. Aaron Parks is one of the most influential pianists and composers in the past 2 decades plus. In this interview, I dive in with him talking about his influences, how he creates his own unique musical identity. He gives wisdom and advice to other musicians, how they can find their own path. And he gives a lot of insight about jazz education and the way that we can learn jazz better. So I hope whether you're a jazz fan, a jazz musician yourself, or you're a teacher, I hope you find a lot of value in this interview. So here it is, Aaron Parks. Welcome, Aaron Parks, pianist, composer, band leader, just huge influence on the jazz scene. We are so happy to have you. Thanks for sitting down and chat today.
Hey, my pleasure, Quentin. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So I have a lot of questions. I've been listening to your music for years, and I was really digging in recently, and I wanted to just dive right out of the gate with if with your sound, and if I guess kind of the intentionality behind it. So when you craft your sound, and I know sometimes things are intentional about how we play or how we want to play. I'm a jazz pianist myself, by the way, just so you know.
Yep.
Some things just come out naturally, just like it's just your personality emerges through your instrument. You don't have to be intentional about it. But I think sometimes there is kind of like a hierarchy of things that we want to do. Like, for instance, when I think of Monk, he seems to really want to execute the tune. Like, he'll do an intro, that's the tune, and he'll comp with the tune, and he'll solo with the tune. It's like, that's so ingrained in his style. Or if you look at like Coltrane in the late 50s, it's like he wanted to get out every idea he could simultaneously. That's where you get all the sheets of sound. So I know this is a super long question out of the gate, but
It's all right.
for you, is there like a hierarchy of things that you really want to say with your sound?
Um, it's a big question, and let's
Yeah.
see how to tackle it. I think it's in a few parts,
Mhm.
perhaps. Um, First of all, I think that you're right in that there is an essence, I suppose you
Yeah.
might call it, that everyone has at their core. That uh, it just is their own particular little spark and their own thing that sort of can't help but coming into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me personally, the way that I've come to think about uh, music and this idea of finding one's own sound
Mm-hmm.
um, is less as something that should be thought necessarily. You don't want to seek it out.
Right.
It's more of something that you cultivate the conditions for
Mm.
it to arise.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
So it's rather than a construction project, it's a gardening one, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so uh, a lot of I think a lot of focus, especially in school environments,
Mm-hmm.
and to some degree, yeah, I mean, just sort of the online learning type of thing as well. Um, there's a lot of emphasis on discrete skills.
Mm.
Um, Learn how to do this little, here's the 251 hack that's going to hook you up. It's sort of BuzzFeed style,
Yeah.
improvisation headlines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those can be useful things sometimes to give you some strategies and some games to play and explore things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think I'm going a long way to your question. I'm going to also answer the question
I
directly,
love
but
it. No, this is great.
um, um, I think that some of the time we lose sight
Mm-hmm.
of, uh, well, I mean, I don't think that it's, at least for me, the music that I really love listening to, and the music and what feels correct to me
Mm,
is, I mean, we you know that feeling of when you have been working on something at home,
mm-hmm,
learning some new skill, some new whatever it might be,
mm-hmm,
and then you try to go to the bandstand or the jam session, and
mm-hmm.
you try to do it,
Oh
and it
yeah.
sort of crumbles and turns to dust in your
Yeah.
hands.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, the way I've come to think about that, it's a little bit like showing up on a date with pickup lines,
That's,
you
that's
know?
great. I love.
And
Yeah.
and so with music, for me, the goal is to, as I say, do all of this work, cultivate
Mm-hmm.
the conditions within, and like work on things that are of interest to you.
Mm,
Um, building your taste, building there is that element of construction for sure, but
mm,
ultimately it's a matter of whatever you're working on is planting seeds and
mm.
then letting go,
Yeah.
letting that garden grow, turning to it in time from time to time, making sure that what's growing there is what you want to grow.
Right.
Like, is are there too many weeds? Maybe the flowers are getting a little bit too ostentatious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm, going a little heavy on the metaphor out
Yeah.
of the gate here, but
No, it's I love it. So if when that translates to when you're working with your band, is it a lot of not planning things out and trying to give that room for let's see what emerges? Kind of, I mean, there's like the whole stories of like Miles' second great quintet never rehearsing, or Bill Evans's trio never rehearsing, or Wayne Shorter never rehearsing. Is it that kind of thing where it's like we have our skills and we want to see what emerges, or is that something that's a little bit more personal? Like I know what I want and I'm not going to force technique out.
I think that that's a little bit more for me, in a personal, as a
Mm,
performer,
mm-hmm,
just my individual sense of musicality,
mm,
rather than trying to craft myself into be like a jazz superhero who can,
mm.
like, business cards. We don't really do that much anymore, but all styles, it says,
Oh, right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Uh, rather than that kind of thing. Uh, I'm more interested in being the kind of person who, uh, like you were saying about Monk, um, Monk serves the song
Mm,
before
mm-hmm,
anything,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's and his approach becomes tailor made according to his own particular um, taste and his own style,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to serve each individual song.
Mm,
And so that's what I'm after in my own very different way,
mm,
which is to serve the song. What is the circumstance in which we're creating music? Is it completely improvised? Is
mm,
it something which is much more highly structured? A band of mine like Little Big,
mm-hmm,
which I would say there's a lot of communication about what we imagine for different songs.
mm-hmm,
Or in some of my more acoustic projects, where more and more I lean towards not saying much of anything at all.
mm.
And
Like the
for
volume
me,
one, volume two
Volume
album.
1, Volume 2, the trio with Ben Street and Billy Hart, the upcoming quartet record that's going to come out later this year.
Awesome.
Yeah, with Ben Street, Billy Hart, and Ben Solomon on tenor saxophone. Um, so yeah, that's sort of a long way around, but
Well,
some
that's
of what I might say
yeah.
about that.
I think that's really insightful, especially when I listen to your music. It's very, I want to say like emotionally charged, and I think that just the way you've described your approach, it would be harder to achieve that kind of, I think, genuine emotion if you were just out to, I'm going to play my favorite 2-5-1 licks and use this
Right.
voice in
And
here and
and of
there.
course it's not as oversimplified as that. I'm sort of dumbing that down to
Hmm.
some degree.
Right.
Um, uh, to make the point, but I think that uh, I think if there are, what I do have are certain principles that I
Mm,
think that I'm interested in,
mm-hmm,
you know, and uh, I'm interested in elasticity, in
mm,
things that stretch and snap back,
mm,
um, as opposed to floatiness. I'm interested in uh, contrast of all sorts, tension and release,
yes.
short and long, loud and soft, little and big.
Mm,
I and surprise, playing with expectations, like a
mm-hmm,
storyteller or a comedian.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
those are principles for me that are interesting when they find their way to the music. And so
Mm,
if I bring my attention towards thinking more like a storyteller or a comedian,
yeah,
or sometimes like a boxer, you know, where's a jab, where's an
yeah,
uppercut?
yeah.
How are you going to time these things? How are you going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes it so compelling when I first heard I think it's the machine say no.
Oh yeah,
And then that's a just brilliant contrast because you have that kind of piano vamp and then the blazing drums just erupts
yeah.
out of nowhere.
Jungkook is, yeah. It's
Yeah.
a little drum and bass freak out track.
It's it's incredible. And yeah, I love that idea of kind of having certain musical concepts that you want to reach or want to convey, and then how am I gonna do that? But yeah, tension release, those contrasts are excellent. Let me see. I remember one of when so I guess for listeners, I first came in contact with you. I was a student at a kind of a jazz residency, like a 2 week retreat, if you will, where a
Yeah.
bunch of kind of young 20 somethings would get together and workshop their tunes and work on playing. And you were one of the clinicians that came. And that was amazing for me. And I remember getting to hear about part of your process, and you explained that a lot of your practicing, at least or maybe at the time, would be kind of just exploring the piano. I remember you said something like you would invent a scale and then try to figure out what harmony or what chords you could make out of that scale. Do I have that right? Is that something that you
That
were
was
doing?
that's one of the things that I've done. I mean, I mean, there are no scales really that haven't been invented,
Right.
but it is also, pretend to invent a scale.
Sure.
I mean, explore it and make something up for yourself
Mm-hmm.
can be uh, really valuable.
Yeah.
And sort of rather than trying to, even if, especially if then you go back and you're like, okay, well, this thing has existed. Let's see how other people have used it before. But
Mm-hmm.
um, absolutely, that type of harmonic exploration, creating limitations for yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
then such as the parameter, whatever the parameters of that scale might be, and seeing what's available inside of it.
Yeah.
That can be a really an interesting way to spark creativity for yourself,
Mm.
I think. And I definitely did some of that.
I remember not, no, and it must have been like 4 or 5 years. Anyway, at some point, I thought I invented the augmented scale. I was like, whoa, look at this. What if you do that and that? And I was just so chuffed and pleased. And I was just like working out all the details. And then I'm like, oh man, there's Wayne Shorter doing it.
But
Rats.
I mean, but that actually, I think, is a really there's something valuable about that when you can have that sense of discovery for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
rather than, and this I think is one of the things that I often miss a little bit in that more academic way of learning, uh,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot more based on authority figures telling you, here are the things you need to know in order to be good, and you figuring out how to do them correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then somehow along the way, but be original, you know? And if you can explore those very basic things as if you're discovering them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned the augmented or whole tone scale.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I am going through a phase. It's funny. I was just writing a friend about this. Um, After all, I'm just like, I feel like there's something about augmented chords that I don't completely understand, and that there's something there that's a key to harmony in a way that I'm like starting to get a glimpse of,
Yeah.
because I've spent a lot of time thinking about diminished chords in
Mm-hmm.
recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there is something about those whole tone scales and those four augmented triads that have another way of
Yeah.
uh, connecting everything. And so, yeah, we're getting a little bit into the weeds here, but
I,
it's funny you mentioned that.
I like the weeds at times, and I'm hoping that the listeners to this, I mean, I'd love to serve the community of just jazz fans, jazz artists and students, and jazz teachers. So I'm happy to get into the weeds. I'm sure someone will benefit from it. But yeah, like for me, like those major thirds that are, or those triads that are third away, and then you just do that sharp five. Like it has this like mysterious, really like interesting sound. And yeah, just trying to like, where can I place that? And these triads can all be upper structures. And since they're augmented chords, they're dividing the octave evenly. So yeah, it's like the diminished stuff, but just whole new world with the different characteristics. So
Exactly. It has its own physics and the way that those chords want to open outward or
Mhm.
inward. It's really um yeah, and especially like rather than, although I do love those four note patterns that you were showing, I'm thinking just the straight up
Mm,
augmented triad
mm.
without, not a four note thing.
I see. Yeah.
Just like the C E G sharp,
Mm-hmm.
and just looking at that basic structure and where are all the different places that could and might
Mm.
want to go,
That's fascinating.
um, and seeing how that can function at a fundamental level, and also, yes, as you say, sort of
Mm.
as part of the scaffolding for upper structures.
Mm.
Um, this These are all really interesting things, and what I recommend is, I wish that people spent a little bit more time exploring
Mm-hmm.
these things, um, in that way of like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like sort of trying to live with the question rather than look for the answer.
That's so well put. And it ties back into kind of the point earlier and about, I don't want to bash academia, but you know, like the whole like, are you learning your Charlie Parker solos, and have you worked on your Coltrane stuff, and like that technique and transcription has a place. But yeah, I think
It's very, very valuable.
yeah,
And it's a part of the process.
right.
It's a part of the process, and I think that um, balancing, doing the deep dive into the history, and I think what I balancing, to follow through with my thought, balancing doing the deep dive of that academic study of history,
Mm-hmm.
learning these things, transcription, analysis,
Mm-hmm.
all of, learning some of the theory,
Mm-hmm.
um, balancing that with then calling everything that you learn into question and sort of looking for the answers for yourself, um, and ultimately not getting too attached to either of those.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not bound by the rules, nor are you bound in opposition to the rules.
Mm. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So your actual freedom is exploring all of it and then having it all available to play with as you choose.
Oh,
Um, and
absolutely.
and so what I do want to say, um, that I think is really important,
Mm,
um, that I don't know gets stressed enough, is the importance of listening to
mm,
music.
mm-hmm.
And I know that's a very simple thing to say,
Yeah.
but but listening to a piece of music over and over again until it becomes a part of you, not
Yeah.
only listening in sort of an extractative sense
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
of I'm going to listen to this and transcribe it, and then I'm going to have something useful I can, I've got my Charlie Parker now. I'm going
There
to
you
move
go.
on to the next thing that I can take
Mm,
something from.
mm,
Um, the I think the goal, at least for me,
mm-hmm.
what and all of this is just my taste. There's, everybody's got their own approach to it. But for what I'm interested in,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to cultivate. I don't want to be a master of music. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be somebody who has a sense of closeness with music,
Mm, mm-hmm.
and have some degree of mastery over the conditions within myself to let
Yeah.
music arise.
I love that. And I feel too when you spend that deep dive, it helps you create your own identity too. Cause if you're really spending time with an album, you're spending time in developing the things that matter for you. Like I think one of
That's
the
right.
very first albums that I got obsessed with and just listened to again and again and again and again was Blues and the Abstract Truth by
Yeah, yeah,
Oliver
yeah.
Nelson. And just like the way his solos were they were it's like they were composed. They were simple, but they were thematic, and he just floated over the changes, and they were enigmatic to me. It just completely captured my imagination. And yeah, doing something like that, I can totally see how that would have so much more value over the development than just, okay, I listened to my Clifford Brown and now I'm going to listen to my Sonny Rollins and now I'm going to listen to, like, and just going through a
Well,
check.
it's very easy to sort of, especially with the entire history of recorded music at our fingertips.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like we need to listen to everything and we've got to check these boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it can be useful to sort of do an overview, but the
Mm-hmm.
thing that, like, allowing ourselves to be honest with ourselves about, hey, what is catching my ear right now?
Mm-hmm.
What do I like? What do
Mm-hmm.
I what do and letting, like almost by a sense of smell.
Mm-hmm.
That smell, I'm
Yeah.
right now, this is what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Um and I'm gonna follow this pretty
Mm-hmm.
intently intensely for a while. It's interesting that record, Blues in the Abstract Truth, it was about, like, that's one of those records. There's so many of those, like, records that almost everybody listens to early on, and
Mm-hmm.
then and you think you've got an idea of what it is,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I went back to that record in particular a couple of years ago, and I was just really struck again just how hip the tunes and the arrangements are, and especially from and Eric Dolphy. Eric
Mm-hmm.
Dolphy on that record is coming out with some moves that nobody sees coming,
No.
like
Yeah.
some yeah, the
Like the
abstract truth
contrast.
indeed.
Like you're talking about contrast. I mean, like, yeah, you'll get someone finishes like Oliver Nelson will finish his solo or whatever, and then yeah, here comes Eric Dolphy, like those big, like just jumping
With
out.
those angular gestures, and that's
Yeah.
one of the things that that I think is very valuable to listen to in music, that sometimes that I sometimes forget,
Mm.
but that I try to remember more and more, is just really paying attention to the gesture more than the
Mm.
notes
Can you elaborate on
necessarily.
that?
Um, what is the shape? What is the shape of the idea? What
Mm.
is like thinking kind of visually. Is it like,
Mm.
is it, vroom, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, is it something that like lands kind of flat-footed, or is it something that kind of swoops in and touches down gently, or maybe just misses, like sort of artfully skids past what, or sort of artlessly skids
Yeah.
past, you
I like
know?
that.
All of these different ways of, I don't know. Gesture for me is something that I'm really fascinated with.
That's really interesting. It's kind of like a macro, or I don't want to say macro analysis, but it's a way of analyzing without having to, get lost in the actual transcription or something.
Well,
Uh,
it's a way to, um, because a lot of the time with all of the book learning,
mhm,
which of course has value.
mhm,
I'm not dismissing the value of it. When it is, um, it's, I would say, a bit overemphasized.
mhm,
It's a bit overemphasized to the point that it can be paralyzing for many musicians,
mhm.
where their mind is so filled with ideas of right and wrong
Right.
that you can't even begin to like, uh, sort of even start something without sort of having the little judgmental uh,
Mm.
creatures start popping up and telling you, "Oh, you're doing it bad. Oh yeah, you're doing it great."
Yeah. Yeah.
And both all of that is incorrect, really. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember it was at that same residency that I was telling you about, and someone was taking a bass solo, and my, jazz major brain was like, okay, bass solo, let me go to the high part of the piano. And the guy stopped me. He's like, what are you doing? That's where I'm
yeah,
playing. Like, go somewhere else. And it was like, I never realized I can go somewhere else. I thought I had to just, move
of
up.
course, yeah. That's what, and there's all sorts of strange ideas that piano players often have or get taught about comping.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and that was, I mean, learning how to comp for bass solos is something that I've only started to get good at in my,
Mm.
you know, mid 30s to early 40s, where I am now,
Mm. Yeah.
and really understanding after actually talking to bass players, like, hey, what do you like?
Yeah.
And it's actually pretty simple in many ways. It's like they've been holding things down for the rest of the band.
Mm.
They don't need a whole lot of rhythm from the piano. They don't need a lot of interaction. People's ears already have a hard enough time, like the general uh, public, like can have a hard time paying attention to a bass solo, like in
Mhm.
general. If you
Mhm.
start doing all sorts of fiddly piano stuff, they don't stand a chance.
Mm.
You give them some support, just so, like a chorale.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
Play nice sounding voicings that help to create a sense of place
Yeah.
harmonically that lets them dance and
Mm.
lets them, and then the bass player then can play with the drums. It's
Mhm.
almost like
Yeah.
the piano player and drummer, when it comes to bass solos, often get things confused between the two
Mm.
of them, where the drummers start getting really, really simple and like
Yeah.
playing on just the hi-hat,
Mhm.
um, and sort of giving no energy to the bass solo.
Mhm.
And the piano players sort of like either playing way up high,
Mhm.
um, or is trying to interact. And it's like, okay, this is our chance to uh, chill out and get into a service position
Mm.
here.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and for bass and drums
Yeah.
to get into something. I mean, that's one recipe, anyways.
Yeah. I like that. And I want to kind of continue, not specifically on the bass solos, but on that concept of, I don't want to say piano misconceptions, but or maybe kind of the pi- templates that pianists use and ways that more modern pianists are changing that. And I'm sure this will be helpful for piano players that are listening or people that are just curious. But I see a trend with modern pianists moving away from just the traditional model of I'm going to play a rootless chord in my left hand and I'm going to play some bebop or post bop language in my right hand. And obviously, modern pianists will fluctuate and they'll flow based on what the music calls for. But I feel like that's the primary way that piano is taught. And that's how I was taught too. Like, okay, do your Bill Evans rootless voicing with the third or the seventh on the bottom, so on and so forth.
That's definitely how it was taught. But this is one of those funny things. This is why I draw a little bit of attention to the academia, because that's not what it sounds like on most of the records. Like, actually, that's not what the piano players are usually doing.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly not before Bill Evans. And there's a
Yes.
whole history of piano before Bill Evans, you
Yeah.
know?
Like Bud Powell, he's throwing
Bud
and
Powell's, yeah, exactly. Horace
most,
Silver.
yeah.
I mean, and then what I also think is that we get taught this idea of rootless voicings. And a lot of this, it's not me like, I don't want to be old man. You guys are doing it wrong. It's also like, it's me looking at myself, knowing my own habits and being like, damn,
Mhm.
I've got to
Yeah.
deprogram myself a little bit as
Yeah.
well. Um, Somewhere along the way, I remember being told that like, it's that the left hand is all about upbeats. You got to play a bunch of upbeats in
Mm.
the
Like a Red Garland kind of
Red
thing.
Garland style.
Yeah.
And I noticed when I noticed there were periods, especially earlier on in my career, and when I'm not careful, or if I'm sort of getting a little unfocused, it's easy for the left hand to get into a sort of herky-jerky responsive mode, but
Mm-hmm.
not really providing a grounding for the
Yeah.
rhythm. And having things that relate to beat one more often and that actually live some of the time, yes, in the lower register rather than just so many of these things that I remember being taught or hearing from
Yeah.
one way or another. It's like, yeah, rootless voicings, lots of upbeats. It's like, well, that's a way that some people do it, but
Mhm.
that's not the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, what I start hearing, um, it's hard for me to even like uh, make the distinction between modern and old. I don't even know.
Mhm.
That's all a little bit unclear for me
Yeah.
these days. But I, I notice that a lot of the people that I like,
Mm.
that I'm drawn to, um, have a way of integrating both hands in a
Yes. Yeah.
way that feels like there's a lot of play with density.
Mm-hmm.
There, you know, Sullivan Fortner, of course, comes to mind as somebody who's a master of
Yeah.
this, of you thinking harmonically and weaving in his um, like letting those single note lines always existing in relation
Yeah.
to a grip on the harmony, a
Mm-hmm.
tactile,
Yeah.
um, in a way that's very, it doesn't sound anything like block chords, for example.
No, it's like,
It's not that.
yeah, it's contrapuntal almost.
It's
And
contrapuntal, but
yeah.
it's it's not like two voice contrapuntal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's its own distinct thing from I also love there's so many different approaches, and there's Brad definitely was doing a lot for the sort of that two voiced, and Fred Hirsch, they
Yeah.
both were doing a lot with the sort of the two distinct voices that you're
Yeah.
kind of paying attention to,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the way that they move with each other.
Yeah.
Um, and I, I'm interested in all of it, and all of them are interesting recipes and interesting things to try to inquire into and see
Totally.
how they fit into your own
Yeah.
particular, like, yeah, what smells good to you, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Just getting those hands talking to one another. I remember I messaged Jason Moran out of the blue, kind of like getting seeing if I was being maybe a little brave or maybe just deluded, but I was like, hey, can you listen to this and give me some feedback? And he was basically saying like, yeah, your hands need to talk to one another. Like
Yeah.
your left hand's on autopilot and your right hand's and I think when you talk about what smells good and what you're drawn to, I think that's that modern sound that I'm drawn to personally. I like that about your playing. The hands talk to one another, or maybe even the one hand starts a line and the other hand takes it over, or whatever it is. Brad obviously does that. Sullivan Fortner, you mentioned Fred Hirsch, Jason Moran. It's
Jason's incredible. And Jason, um, the older I get, and also perhaps the older Jason gets, um, I'm just coming to appreciate Jason more and more and more. His left hand is something to behold.
yeah.
Um, not not because of its technical virtuosity or independence or
Mhm.
anything like that, although
Mhm.
that's there, but
Mhm.
because of its authority and the way that it reaches down and like touches the ground, and
Oh
the
yeah.
it's it there's a understanding of resonance and an understanding of groundedness
Mm.
in Jason's left hand, which I'm fascinated by, and is sort of in line with a lot of the things that I'm finding myself drawn to as a listener these days
Mm.
as well.
That's fascinating. Let me see. Let's see. I have some other things. Let me ask some questions that might be helpful for teachers. Um, so not all listeners might know this. You started music college at a young age, I believe, and then you also started touring as a sideman while you were still in college. So with that unique experience, and I know a little bit of a theme today has been talking about academia. And again, I don't want to bash academia. I was able to hone my sound through it, and I teach a lot myself. But
Yeah,
were there any specific things that when you were experiencing jazz as a touring artist while simultaneously in school, you wish that could be a greater part, or like, hey, this is being completely missed. I guess like an analogy could be like, I remember in high school, all my friends were like, why are we in AP biology? I wish someone would teach us how to do our taxes. Like,
sure. Well, I mean, I think um, it's hard for me to, yeah, this I to be clear, I don't think that I have so much a problem with I don't have a problem with teaching, to be
of
clear.
course,
I
yeah.
do think that um I do think the way that we teach things and the way that we talk about
Mm,
things matters. And when things are talked about in terms of correct and incorrect,
okay.
um, and um, and sort of like this, like you got to get this together. You know,
Mm,
like I don't. It's hard for me to put my finger on it because on the one hand, there is an element of that which is true,
mhm.
right? But we overemphasize that, I think, to a lot, and I do think that sometimes, particularly the model in a lot of in America and maybe the Western world in general, but especially America, which has an emphasis on um, results oriented learning. Like,
Yeah.
can you demonstrate that you've learned something at the end
Mhm.
of this course?
Right,
I
right.
need you to be able to have something which is testable,
Hmm.
right?
That, yeah.
And um, and if it's not testable, then have you really learned anything?
Right.
Because yeah, because like you need to give a grade, blah blah
Right,
blah.
right.
And I think that music in its I don't think that that's really the way to learn it. That
Right.
just doesn't make a lot of sense for it. I
Mhm.
think the way to be learning music is for teachers to be a little bit, um, and this isn't, of course, I'm making blanket statements which are not true, but I do I do think that there is often, and teachers have it rough a lot of the time. It's not like it's a
Yeah.
great gig, and there's a lot of paperwork to do, and all
Yeah.
these administrative functions, and it's easy to sort of like, okay, well, let me make this. Here's my one size fits all approach.
Right.
Here's what you all need to know,
Hmm.
and what you end up with that approach. Um, is sometimes a bunch of people who have learned or are at various stages at learning the same skill set without
Mm.
necessarily having asked themselves the question of why.
Yes. Yeah. And that
um
yeah. Sorry.
yeah, and so um having a little bit more emphasis on questions again rather than answers.
Mm.
If teachers um weren't like, here's the thing to do, but were like, hey, what if? Can you make can you make something for yourself?
Yeah.
uh Create some parameter, like create a limitation for yourself, some um giving the students something that makes them feel like they have some more skin in the game,
Hmm.
rather than it's a thing to cross your t's and dot your i's.
Right.
Well, I did it right, why don't
Yeah.
I sound good, right?
Yeah. 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 I learned autumn leaves in all 12 keys. Where are my
Exactly,
gigs?
where are my gigs?
That's great.
um
Yeah. And I think that ties into what you were saying too about, I mean, you mentioned the asking questions, why the exploring aspect of music, just go explore, go like that type of creativity. I absolutely love that and applaud that. I
th-
think.
there's one more thing that I think is important to mention. This is something that I heard from Ben Street, the great bassist and
Mhm.
one of the greatest teachers that I know. Um, he he said he we were teaching in a class recently, and he said something um, which is like, forget about styles. There is no such thing as bebop. There
Mm.
like, forget about learning styles.
Mm.
Learn people.
Ooh. Yeah.
Find find the people who have something that you're interested in.
Mm.
Don't learn how to play bebop piano,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm. Yeah.
um, Fall in love with, say, Bud Powell,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Not the abstract idea of bebop piano. Or if you like, are if you want, like, or like, okay, maybe it's Barry Harris as the piano player as well. Like, let's go
Right.
listen to a bunch of Barry Harris, see how we feel about that.
Yeah. And I feel like that touches so much on the concept of jazz as a language, because it's like
Mm,
if you learn just bebop, it'd be like learning to speak out of a dictionary or a vocabulary book
exactly.
versus
That's right.
learning. Yeah, that
That's
yeah.
exactly right. And so
I
you can try to find the people that you love, and just feel like you're spending time with them,
hmm
um, on the records. And if you're the kind of person who likes reading biographies and getting to know as much about their life as you can, that's an interesting way to do things. I haven't done a lot of that myself. I
mm,
think I'd like to do more. I'm, I think I'm probably going to try to find out more about the guy that I'm currently uh, obsessed with. And I can't get enough Mal Waldron right now.
oh yeah, I haven't
And
done a deep
Mal,
dive in. Yeah.
no, and I've been trying to put my finger on what is going on. Um, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something there that is just, it's no bullshit. It's no
Mm,
bullshit, and it's very clear. And
hmm
the development, it's just, there's something about it which is,
Mm.
It's plain spoken, but with like that grounded authority.
Like very intentional playing,
Very
almost.
intentional and
Mm.
very mysterious at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, in a way that, yeah, I'm listening to a whole bunch of Mal right now.
Mm.
Um,
That's interesting. I have to do a deeper dive onto him. I feel that way sometimes about, and forgive me because I haven't done a deep dive on him, but some of the stuff I've heard from Paul Bley, specifically
right.
like when he does trio stuff and when he explores standards. Like, for instance, on your volume one, when you do All the Things You Are, and then on volume
Yeah.
two, you do Body and Soul. Like, I love that because it's rooted in the tradition, yet you step out, but it's not playing out for out's sake. Like, it has this wonderful organicness to it. And I'll sometimes hear
Oh, well,
that
thanks.
in Paul's play. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
for sure. I mean, Paul is a huge, huge influence for me.
Mm,
Um, and in some ways is feels on the surface level, you might they almost seem diametrically opposed
mm,
because Paul's thing goes so far into sometimes like flights of fancy and abstraction.
hmm. Yeah.
He just follows. He's really like following his nose. You listen to that
Hmm.
classic solo of his on "All the Things You Are." You've from
Yes. Yeah.
Coleman, the
Yeah.
Sonny Rollins, Sonny Meets
Yeah.
Hawk with Coleman
Yeah.
Hawkins, and uh, I remember the first time I heard that, it just turned my world inside out. I'm like, you
Mm.
can do that? Didn't know
Yeah.
that was allowed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so it might seem real. I mean, and it is a very different world from Mao. Um, and both of them have that same sense of I don't know, like gravity.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that is I can't put my finger on, but it's
Mm.
something that I'm interested in,
Very
um,
cool.
that I'm trying to prioritize and deepen.
I love that. Trying to think if there's, so we got Paul Bley, Mal Waldron. Are there any other jazz influences that either you're currently listening to, or people that you would attribute as key in your development?
Well, I mean, it's a whole list of, folks that I went through periods of obsession with, you know.
Mm, hmm.
I think my first love was Gene Harris.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
fell in love with Gene Harris when I was first starting out with the Ray Brown Trio.
Hmm.
And then I think, I mean, just keep doing my little chronological thing for a second. Like,
Yeah.
I can give you the really early ones, which were like Gene Harris, and then the piano players from the Ray Brown Trio. So it was Benny Green and Jeff Keezer,
Nice.
because it was basically like Ray Brown Trio was my gateway drug.
There
And
you go.
so, and then McCoy, Herbie. The
Hmm.
first live jazz show that I ever saw was Keith, actually, which was a crazy thing to be the first live show. And so that set me off on,
Yeah.
Keith, huge influence.
Yeah.
Um, Chick in an early, although it hasn't, I haven't listened as much in recent years, but it might be due for me to go back and check in again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, Brad, of course, um, especially like in that era of Art of the Trio, Volume 3 and Volume 4, super
Mm-hmm.
influential to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Gonzalo Rubalcaba, very important for me. That
Mm-hmm.
record, Inner Voyage, really deeply informed my aesthetics of touch and also of what I was talking about, elasticity, that sense
Mm-hmm.
of when do things stretch out, when do they arrive right on time, when do they get delayed. Um,
Yeah.
Danilo Perez, huge for me.
Mm.
Danilo, I used to see his trio all the time. in New York with Ben Street and Adam Cruz.
Sure.
And the adventurousness of that band and the groundedness.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, there's the live record, Live at the Jazz Showcase. It's
Mm-mm.
not on streaming. It was like
Okay.
it might be. I hope that they get it on streaming at some point. I was talking to Danilo about it because it captures that band in the in all of their power and whimsy that they have live.
Yeah.
But there's also the record Till Then, which that trio is on part of it. I mean, yeah, as
Yeah.
you can see, I can go on and on and on.
Hmm.
Shirley
Yeah.
Horn.
Nice. Yeah.
Shirley Horn for me is huge as well for sound, for how to play on a ballad, um,
Mm-hmm.
voicings, timing, sense of space, sense of place. Uh, then Rand Blake comes into the picture for creating mood, place. Bill
Hmm.
Evans also for that, as well
Hmm.
as the just the tactile grippiness
Yeah.
in his thing. I mean,
Oh,
like
yeah.
there's yeah, there's a lot. I mean, Ahmad
Yeah.
Jamal, come on.
Like a timeline. Yeah.
It's stupid. There's so many people. Um and
And
Jerry Allen, who I'm only still scratching the surface of. You
yes.
know, I spent some time with her music a few years ago, like really doing a bit more of a, after she passed, and I was
Mhm.
like, man, what was I kind of missed the boat on this.
He's like a
Um,
synthesis of like early Herbie and Chick and McCoy. Like it's just this beautiful, like taking all these kind of disparate 70s and 80s approaches and just like boom, just so clean and so creative. Yeah, love Jerry Allen's
yeah,
music.
I don't know that I can name exactly what it is. There's just something mysterious. That solo piano record of hers,
Mm, hmm.
that's homegrown. That one,
Mm,
uh, wow. Um, that's one that, I mean, yeah, again, gravity in the earth. It's all there
hmm.
too.
That's awesome. Well, I
Oh
really,
man,
really
Duke,
go.
Duke Ellington on piano. Man, that's the thing that like piano reflections.
Piano Reflection. I'm so glad you brought that up. I feel like everyone's sleeping on Duke's piano play, like Money Jungle and Piano Reflections. Like just his approach is different than anyone else.
I mean, and that's what Monk said,
Mm.
right? That
Hmm.
he was just basically trying to play like Duke,
Yeah, yeah, that's all.
doing his version of Duke.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't know if that's exactly how he said it. Here I go, like that's what he said. I don't
Hey,
know.
I'm gonna call you on that. Aaron Parks is saying, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you taking the time, taking the hour to do this. It was awesome diving into all this stuff. I want to make sure we plug and talk about any websites, upcoming projects you have. Is there anything that you want to share that we can link
I don't
to?
know. Not too much in particular. I think I've got the record out with my band Little Big. I'm excited about. I I really love that record. I also really love the acoustic quartet record that's coming out.
Mm,
Um, yeah, in the autumn, and yeah, I feel very excited to be playing some more swinging music again.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
it's something that I've never that is a really really valuable and important part of my practice, and
Mhm,
that I care about a lot. But it
mhm,
hasn't been that much recorded for quite a
mm.
while. But it's something that I'm feeling that call, and I'm
It's awesome.
yeah.
I think I mean not to put my taste too much. I'm a big fan of swing, and
Yeah.
particularly swing being made in the 21st century, because the language has evolved so much. I'm really excited to hear that that project when it comes out. So
Yeah, thanks. I'm very excited. Billy Hart is on drums, and he is playing. I mean, it's really just astonishing what he's playing. Not it doesn't. It's not. It's not like, oh yeah, well he's a legend. He's playing great because no, he's playing. It's sick what he is playing on this record.
awesome. Oh man, Autumn. All right,
Yeah.
I'll be looking out for that. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Aaron. I really appreciate it. Have an awesome rest of your day. And
Thanks,
yeah.
Thank you for checking out this interview with Aaron Parks. If you want to learn more about jazz, if you're a jazz fan, a jazz musician, maybe you're a teacher, anything that you need to help grow your appreciation and love for jazz can be found at thisisjazz.com. You can visit us, check out the description below, and while you're at it, press that subscribe and like button. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next This Is Jazz interview.